Welcome to Future Media. Today I returned from my regular segment on Disrupt Radio to discuss my exclusive story about Google's secret plan to switch off search in Australia and hide the plan from its billion-dollar partner Samsung. My scoop made headlines across the country after we broke it late yesterday. The full report is on my Substack Future Media, but here I discuss it with George McEncroe on Disrupt Radio. You can listen to Disrupt live at www.disrupt.radio. But for now, let's get into it. Let's.
This is Muller with George McEncroe on Disrupt Radio.
Ricky Sutton is my guest. He's the founder and former CEO of ooVoo and the author at Future Media newsletter. Thank you for joining me, Ricky.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Now, I believe that we have a secret plan that's been revealed by Google. Tell us about these redacted emails that came about.
All right, so this is quite a scoop, this one. So deep in the documents that were filed in Google's antitrust case that's currently ongoing in the US were the details of Google's secret plan to turn off search for all Australians. So if you cast your mind back to early 2000s or late 2000s, we had a situation where the Australian government had wanted to make Google pay for the content that it was using from Australian publishers. And that was very controversial because it set a huge precedent for Google that meant that this might be carried out in other countries, and Google didn't want to pay for the content. And so Google made an announcement that it was going to switch off search to all Australians unless the government did not take that action. Now, these documents that I've uncovered and that I run on the Substack basically show the actual plan that Google had to do that, but it also shows two fascinating new things. The first thing is that Google was going to turn off search, or was already made all the plans to switch off search in Australia 3 months before it made that threat public.
Wow.
That's a surprise. And the second thing is that they had just signed a multi-billion-dollar deal with Samsung, the maker of the mobile phones, which is the largest selling mobile phone here in Australia. They just signed a multi-billion-dollar deal to be the default search engine for Samsung. Now, fascinatingly, that meant that they were about to turn off search at just the time they'd done this deal with Samsung. And in these emails, the senior Google executive decide and agree between them not to tell Samsung they're doing it until they've already done it.
Wow.
And
So
all of that is in these documents.
So the idea being that anyone who had an iPhone would no longer get, or a Mac or any of that, they won't get Google search as part of their package, but everyone who owned a Samsung, the Android phone that is the most popular phone in the country, they would have it automatically.
No, it would have switched off search, Google search, for everyone.
Everyone,
Now,
including Samsung owners.
Everyone. So
Wow.
what was actually going to happen was that if you had a Samsung phone, and if you have a Samsung phone, the home screen on your Android will be the Samsung phone home screen and a big Google search bar at the bottom of it. Now, if you'd used that Google search bar on your Samsung phone, it would have returned a message, or it would have returned a screen that says, Google search is not available in this country for the time being. We hope to be back soon. More than that, the documents that I've shared, that I'm showing, actually even show the screens that Google had made that were going to be displayed to Samsung's customers if they tried to use it. And they weren't going to tell Samsung until after they'd done it.
Wow.
Which is a quite astonishing revelation. So if you're thinking about market power, you've got a global telco, it actually ships more phones than Apple, Samsung. So you've got the world's largest handset manufacturer being kept in the dark by Google at the dawn of a multi-billion-dollar partnership. It's quite a shock.
Man, so they would have bought it, then that this would have been discovered at Google, I'm assuming, would have hoped that was all too late, or they might have been prepared to go to court and battle it out. I mean, I'm assuming they would have thought they could have gotten away with it, or they wouldn't have gone to all the trouble of mimicking screens and doing all the artwork and all the framing for this device?
I'm not sure what would have been in Google's mind, but what I do know is that the Australian government and the Anti-Competition Commission, the ACCC, were very determined to reset the power between Google and publishers and make that more fair, more reasonable. But Google knew that if that happened, a global precedent was set that governments all over the world may have enacted, and that would have upturned the whole of Google's business model. And so in that world, sorry, I've got a truck going past.
That's all right. I believe you are on the road with your family.
I am. I'm doing van life this week. But
Oh, good.
I'm sorry. Let me get back to the important stuff. But Google would have faced a precedent that could have rolled out globally that completely upended its business model. And in that scenario, they're stuck in a Hobson's choice between I can't tell my new partner we're about to do this, and then also I can't allow this to happen. And so I would imagine it was a very difficult time for them, and they agonize in the emails over what to do. But after a long discussion, they agree and share the email among all of these executives, including a director of Google's board, that they say, don't tell them explicitly.
Wow. So I mean, the deal didn't go through ultimately. Publishers don't get paid to be searched on Google, do they? It's not a paid platform for publication.
Well, what actually happened was the ACCC law said at a certain date, if an agreement was not met between publishers and Google, that the government would take action to do that deal. Now, what actually happened in effect was that shortly before that deadline was reached, Australian publishers buckled and took payments from Google. Now, those Google payments are not public, the volumes aren't public, but it's leaked out over the years, and it's about $200 million a year that those publishers get paid by Google for their content on the platform. And that has set a precedent, and those deals are rolling out. There's currently a negotiation taking place in Canada on exactly this. But those payments worked for 1 year. Meta then decided not to pay again. Meta was part of the deal. They decided not to pay again. And the Google deal is up for renewal now, and no one knows if it's going to renew. So it's a really murky space.
It really is. And who are some of the publishers that you know of that were being paid under the previous deal?
Well, under the deal that's in place at the moment, the big ones, it's not private. The Guardian's in that list, News Corp's in that list, Nine is in that list. They're all paid by Google now because of this change in the law that was enacted. But what this shows is that Google was ready and willing and had already done the work to turn off search for every Australian 3 months before it made the threat public that it was going to do so.
So, I mean, they do need to be brought to heel, don't they? I mean, what sort of options does our government have to actually enter into a negotiation with Google in a transparent way? Like, without punishing ordinary, citizens of the country?
Well, I think that the laws already are in place. And the actual action that needs to be taken is the action that's already underway in the US. So I think we have spoken in recent weeks about the fact that this Google antitrust trial, even though it doesn't seem to be getting as much coverage as it probably should, affects every single one of us in every click we make on the internet, and it will shape what the internet looks like. So if the US government succeeds in its case to prove that Google's dominance and scale means that it's held back innovation in the internet, that it stopped competitors from being able to fairly compete. If that's found to be true, then Google faces a breakup. And if Google is broken up, it creates competition between its internal units, whether that's search or advertising or devices. And that ultimately usually creates a better outcome for competitors, but also for consumers. And I think that's the action that everybody's waiting to see conclude.
Yeah, I'd be looking forward to seeing the end of these trials and what comes out of it. Right now, a song. ads and a song. We'll come back shortly.
After a short break, we were back.
Ricky Sutton is my guest. He is a man very well known across Silicon Valley, founder and former CEO of Uvu, and the current author at Future Media. Ricky knows everything about everything, but he's particularly well versed in the actions of some of these massive media companies like Google. So Google in these antitrust trials, how are they coming across, Ricky? How would you say their testimony and the evidence has set them in the eyes of the public?
That's a fascinating question. Thank you for that one. Look, I think it's been a bit of a surprise for me and most of the people watching that they haven't been more vehement in their defense. The Department of Justice in the US has come out with an incredibly strong series of statements. You know, they've talked about prices being put up by Google without asking anyone's permission. They've talked about total dominance, rivals with $650 million of investment being crushed to nothing. You know, we've heard an awful lot about that. But when it's come to Google's defense that's run for the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's been very technical. It's been very dry and hasn't garnered any of the same level of interest. And in a nutshell, Google's defense is, well, for us to be guilty of dominating or monopolizing search, you have to believe that search is a thing. And you think that general search is us versus Bing, but it's not. There's lots of people in search. So Amazon sees people search on shopping, and Yelp sees people search for places to eat, all of which are search competitors to us. So if you can't prove that we are the only search player, then how can we monopolize that space? That's been their main argument. So it's been a real surprise. So how do people think about it? I think people are saying, well, I think most people would have a view that search is search is search. If you're going to get up in the morning and do a search, where do you go? You go to Google.
Yeah.
That defines the market. So if that's found to be true, then I'm not sure what Google's defense is going to be here. And it feels very much like that they might not win. And to that point, let me just point out that last week, end of last week, a lot of the US analysts that are looking at share prices and advising investors, professional investors, suddenly changed their tune and began to say, actually, do you know what? I'm downgrading Google. I'm not sure they're going to win this case. And so it will be a while before we get the results. But right now, the smart money looks like it's on a Google losing.
So if Google does lose, how does that impact them? I mean, they are so ubiquitous. They are so dominant. Are they just saying, well, there's no such thing as a fine that's going to actually really hurt? I mean, it might be a blip. We may not be able to return dividends to shareholders. We may not be able to do certain things. But ultimately, we are so comfortable with our place in the world that we're kind of untouchable. Or are they just oblivious to how much danger they're in?
Oh, I think they know what danger they're in, but I think that maybe, and this is purely speculation on my part, but internally at the highest levels, I think they're starting to realize that some kind of antitrust is inevitable. And what that will lead to, I mean, this will take years, but what it will lead to is a breakup of Google. So at the moment, Google and Alphabet is one enormous company with tendrils in absolutely everything, from search to advertising to data to shopping, to mobile phones to Android. I mean, they're in everything, right? What this case basically starts is the process of stopping all of those living under one giant umbrella, one giant alphabet, and now actually becoming independent companies, a spin-off of YouTube so it can compete. A spin-off of advertising so that it's actually much more competitive than just looking after Google. And so I think that that's what's likely to happen. And I get the sense, as I said, that this is starting to feel like an obvious outcome, an inevitable outcome for Google.
And this will then mean that there's precedent to stop other companies in the future from, will it impact Facebook? Will it impact other giant tech giants who have put their tendrils. I mean, no one has done it as well as Google. I know, like from public transport through to all our mapping and directions. But, does it serve then as a precedent to build in better anti-competition laws?
Well, it creates a fascinating change in the leadership group of the largest tech companies in the world. So Microsoft was broken up 20 years ago and ended up being a larger company than it was before the breakup. Okay, so really, Google's the next cab off the rank, but the one next after that is going to be Amazon.
Yeah.
So there's an antitrust case already listed to go up for Amazon. And all of this, fascinatingly flows back to one spot. It flows back to a lady called Lina Khan, who is the head of the Federal Trade Commission in the US. She has absolutely fearlessly gone after big tech on antitrust. And pretty much everyone's got an antitrust suit against them at the moment. If you don't have one, it's almost like you're not big enough. It's a badge of honor to have one. And so Google's got an antitrust case on search. It's got an antitrust case on advertising. It's got an antitrust case on the App Store. They just keep coming thick and fast. But it's all down to Lina Khan. And she was hugely criticized a few months ago for going for the big hits, going for the big ones and never winning. But people aren't really saying that right now. People are sitting there going, oh my goodness, she might actually pull this off. And so it changes the structure of the internet for all of us. And so that's going to be big, big news.
And so these decisions that happen in one place, like in the United States, it's always how global these companies are that seems to make bringing them to heel so difficult, because, they're everywhere and they're nowhere. Is if they change the laws in one place that affects them globally?
It does. Absolutely. It will change the structure of that company. But fascinatingly, when you look at it like that, the only country that these tech companies are really afraid of being damaged is the US, because that's their home. They know Europe is tough on this kind of stuff, and they know that Australia is going to push the hot buttons every now and again, like they did. But really, it's the US. And the US has protected these companies for 20 years, and now they're not.
Yeah, well, that's changing the landscape that everybody will be watching very, very closely. And I think it is time that people got to see what goes on. Even if you try and lead a defence that is dry and dull, there are people like you catching the juicy bits that fall to the floor, especially those unredacted emails. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoy your holiday. Ricky Sutton, he's living in a van at the moment, not because he's fallen on hard times, but because he's with his family. I hope you have a great trip. Thank you for being our guest.
Thanks, George. Great to see you.
Thanks for listening. I know you're all busy. Look, the future of the web will impact on us all, and the generations that come after us, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon, Netflix, they're all jostling for the next $1 trillion and for control of AI. It's all up for grabs. The experience you get when you next look at a screen will be decided by these events. The court cases, emerging technologies, emergency orders across the globe, even your next click. These will decide the path of the future. So stay across my Substack Future Media. Please sign up if you haven't already, and stay tuned to Disrupt Radio. Thanks for your time, and I'll be back next week.